there's a report that came out recently that's talking about the U.S. Army, and it is considering reversing gender-neutral physical tests after a majority of women fail to keep up with men. So this is kind of right in line. Honestly, I'm surprised they haven't done this already. By the way, and I'll mention that a little bit later. So basically what they're doing, and this is the report, the United States Army is reportedly considering doing away with its new gender-neutral physical test after test results show that the majority of women failed, while approximately 90% of men actually passed. So officials are reportedly considering having different evaluation categories for men and women due to the physiological differences between the two. So I can't wait for this, the response from this one here. I mean, you can't bring up the fact that men and women have physiological differences. I mean, that's not possible, right? At least according to the left. They don't want to talk about this whatsoever. Because to them, men and women can achieve the exact same thing physically all the time, no matter what, and there's no discrepancy. So therefore, because there's no difference between men and women, you should be able to not have to change any of this. Well, that's obviously not the case because the real world says otherwise. And here you have them, of course, giving these different things that are going on here. So the report from last fall found that 54% of women failed the test, while only 7% of men failed the test. So a captain in the military, by the way, named Kristen Griest, says, and she's actually the Army's first female infantry officer, wrote last month that lowering fitness standards to accommodate women will hurt the Army and women. I mean, I completely agree. I completely agree with what she's saying. Number one, it's going to hurt the Army because what you're doing is that you're letting weaker people into the Army. That makes sense. But you're also hurting women because you're basically saying, you know what, we'll lower the standards for you to be able to get into this, to be able to do this thing. And you're only making it kind of less of a hurdle for women to get into the Army in the first place. You're basically saying, you know what, you don't need to achieve what men can achieve. You can achieve this lesser goal and do the same thing that they're doing. So it does hurt women in that way as well. She went on to say that implementing gender-based scoring or reducing the minimum standards for combat arms would have both immediate and insidious impacts on combat effectiveness, as well as on women's credibility and potential. Like I said, she's right in line with what she's saying here. Here's my question. What happened to equality when we're looking at this whole story? I mean, the left will tell you that equality is this thing where everybody is able to do the same thing that anyone else can do. But what they forget, what they leave off, is how they go about trying to achieve that. That's the problem. See, a meritocracy is equality. It's this idea that you earn your way to being able to do whatever it is. Now, for the longest period of time, conservatives have been for equality. I mean, we always have. There's never been a situation where we weren't for equality. But the issue is that you have a lot of these people that are trying to change these rules and they're doing it in an incorrect way. So before I get into a little bit more of that, they go on to basically say the entire purpose of creating a gender-neutral test was to acknowledge the reality that each job has objective physical standards to which all soldiers should be held. Of course, correct. Everybody needs to be on the same playing field of expectations. So she goes on to say that the intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. Rather, it is incumbent upon women who volunteer for the combat arms profession to ensure they are fully capable and qualified for it. To not require women to meet equal standards in combat arms will not only undermine their credibility, but also place those women, their teammates, and the mission at risk. So let's take a portion of what she's talking about here. She says, the intent was not to ensure that women and men will have an equal likelihood of meeting those standards. See, here's what we're talking about here. This is what conservatives have been talking about for a while now. It's what I've been talking about for a while now. Conservatives, common sense people, we want equal opportunity. What the left wants is equal outcome. So what do these things mean? Because this is fundamental to understanding the difference between the type of equality that conservatives are for and the type of equality that a lot of Democrats are wanting. So the actual conservatism, or the actual equality that conservatives are for, is basically saying everyone has an opportunity to do X, to, say, in this situation, get into the army. Here's the test. Everybody's going to be tested equally. Men, women, black, white, whatever you are. Everybody gets the same test. Everybody scored exactly the same. Everybody has the exact same expectations. That is the equality that conservatives are for. Because you are saying nobody gets an easy pass, nobody gets it harder than someone else. It's simply what it is. Here's the standard. This is where you need to be. And if you don't meet it, you fail. And if you meet it, you pass. Democrats do it in a completely different way. The way that they see equality is that, taking that example of this test that you need to pass to get into the army, is that they say, okay, well, there's this standardized test that everybody takes, but then they're looking at these percentages I just presented to you, where 54% of women are failing. And they say, oh, well, that's not good. We need to make sure that 90% of women are passing, just like 90% of men are passing. So what they'll basically do is they'll say, we'll reduce the guidelines or reduce the requirements for the test for women until they hit that number, until 90% of women get in. And then what they'll say at the end of it all is they'll say, okay, now that we reduced the requirements for women to get into the military, then they'll say it's equal, right? Because now we have 90% of women getting in and 90% of men getting in. Nobody gets an advantage. Nobody has a disadvantage or anything like that. Everybody's equal, right? That's what they'll say. But they won't mention the fact that women got it way easier. That women didn't have to work as hard to get there. That men have to achieve significantly higher physical requirements to get into this and to be able to achieve this. It's effectively what affirmative action has done in colleges. It's saying, oh, well, because you're black, we're just going to assume you're not educated. We're going to assume you're poor. We're going to assume you come from a bad family. So we're just going to make your requirements way lower. You can test lower on the SAT. That's not equality. It's equal outcome. It's basically them just trying to say, well, we're just going to try and equal out the percentages, right? It's like the kind of the quotas. We need an X certain amount of women in. We need an X certain amount of women or men in, and black men and white women and this generation, this person, this age group. That's the way they look at everything. Conservatives are simple. We just want a simple, plain, across the board meritocracy where there's a standard test to get in. That's what it is. And that's what this woman here is talking about. That women should be held to the same standard as anyone else. We're talking about defending the country. And what she's talking about here in this whole story, by the way, is already being done in police departments. Women literally have a different test and testing standard than men do in police departments. I mean, we can debate back and forth whether that's right, wrong, or the other. It doesn't matter. Like I said, none of this is about women not being able to play or do these things in the military or to be able to do these jobs. The point is that they should be allowed to do it as long as they meet the requirements to get there. If you earn it, you get there. That's the point. Instead of focusing on how many actually pass or fail or how well they do, the point is that everybody should be able to have the same exact opportunity. Not the exact same outcome. You can't guarantee that. You're going to always have to stifle the opportunity in order to give somebody else a better outcome. And that doesn't make sense. That's not how this works. That's unequal. It's actually inequality to do that. The numbers and percentages might be equal, but the difference between men and women and what they had to do to get there, that's not equal at all. Because plain and simple, you're going to have to score a higher test score on the SAT if you're white trying to go to one of these affirmative action schools. And you're going to have to perform a lot better on these physical tests if you're a man trying to get into the military. And that's if these things, of course, go through. So this isn't limited to a particular topic. It's not limited to the government. It's a much bigger thing than that. It's literally what the left uses to determine who's advantaged and who's disadvantaged in their way of thinking. The left sees those percentages, and they always are going to try and figure out how to change that, manipulate it, so that they can all be equal in that sense. You just watched a clip from The William Hall Show. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.